Sure, you may have seen a few strategy RPGs here on YouTube, and yeah, maybe a few World War II games, but when was the last time you saw a World War II strategy RPG? Let's take a fun-filled trip through the world's bloodiest scrape with Armageddon, with a healthy sprinkling of vampires and werewolves for good measure. What's up guys, I'm Jared, and this is Avalanche Reviews.
I guess we're done for.
Damn that intel unit! Think they could have mentioned they had a bloody tank? What now?
Operation Darkness takes place during World War II and follows the story of Edward, a simple British soldier, until he's saved from death by an elite and covert group named the Wolf Pack.
Now this is gonna sting a bit, lad, but it'll save your life.
After a life-saving blood transfusion, Edward and his friend Jude are taken in by the Wolf Pack and taught that there is more to this conflict than meets the eye. Yes, it seems that within the Nazi war machine, a cabal of ancient vampires called the Blood Clan have risen through the ranks. These bloodsuckers are using their positions in the SS and their legions of zombified Nazis to accomplish some really dark stuff, and it's up to the Wolf Pack to keep the world from falling into the hands of this supernatural threat. Honestly, with a setup like this, the story doesn't even really have to go anywhere. If we're talking Nazi zombies shooting at allied werewolves, I'm already as invested as humanly possible. That being said, our main character is pretty bland, and exactly what you would expect out of a typical RPG hero. His teammates, on the other hand, offer up a much more relatable personality set, and I found myself more interested in them than I ever was in Edward's struggle to maintain a childlike air of ignorance about his surroundings.
What the hell am I doing?
If it wasn't obvious from my other reviews, I love me an alternate history tale, and Operation Darkness definitely hits that sweet spot. The idea of vampires lurking behind the scenes and directing Nazi forces towards some supernatural goal just speaks to me in some weird way. As far as RPG storylines go, this isn't exactly the most involved, but the inclusion of actual World War II history and footage lends a good deal of believability to this tale. Or at least as much as you would expect from a game that has you throwing fireballs at swastika-clad zombies.
Cordelia!
Operation Darkness is one of those rare games that has almost as much wrong with it as there is right. So, let's start from the top. Now first off, this is a strategy RPG, and I'm sure most of you know what that entails, but just in case, you take control of a squad of soldiers moving around on a grid and taking turns shooting at your enemy. Since the game deals in guns almost exclusively, attack ranges reach much further than you might be used to. So to compensate for this change, the areas you fight in are much larger. Because of this, fights tend to rely on distance, attack range, and cover a lot more than your typical strategy RPG. And since you can't shoot through obstructions, you're almost always faced with a risk versus reward scenario. Sure, you may be able to pull off that shot if you move out in the open, but you'll also be putting yourself in the enemy's line of fire. When the game first starts out, it's crazy hard to get the hang of, since even one character dying means a game over. But early on, you learn a skill that will let party members use healing items when their life drops below 20%, which transitions nicely into the fact that this game has permadeath for any non-story related characters. Now normally I'm pretty okay with this kind of mechanic. I mean, I've been a fan of the XCOM and Fire Emblem series for a while, but things start to unravel when I'm never told about a permadeath system, and perhaps in this hypothetical situation, I lost two really cool characters after a long fight and saved right afterwards. The good news is you can hire additional party members. The bad news? They all have generic character art and start out really low level. Much like the XCOM series, soldiers in Operation Darkness can set up cover fire, which will attack any enemy that wanders into range with lessened damage as a trade-off. Cool mechanics like this, and certain characters being able to use magic or transformations, make any given fight feel fresh and worth its pretty steep difficulty curve. And if Balls to the Wall Challenge hasn't soured you on this game yet, maybe I can throw in some pretty serious slowdown and a minor case of screen tearing. Now typically this is something that really gets on my nerves, but for some reason, it didn't really bother me too much here.
Well, well, well. If it isn't the Fire Witch.
But it would be dishonest of me to stop the complaints here. One of the biggest foes you'll face in this game won't have a Nazi uniform on. No, your biggest hindrance will be the game's camera. Controlling this beast is way too sensitive, and the fact that it outright refuses to move through obstacles makes even the simple act of moving your party around way more difficult than it has any right to be. So now that I've told you how difficult the game can be and how finicky the camera is, I'm going to contradict all that and say that this is a pretty fun strategy RPG. Yes, there are a mountain of things wrong with it, but it still feels fresh, and everything from grinding levels for new recruits to squaring off against as many as 30 Nazi zombies was just fun for me. Sure, things can get frustrating, but I still load up that last save and jump right back in almost immediately after I die. As far as whether or not I can recommend this game on its gameplay alone, well, that's just one of those situations I'm going to have to leave up to you. Even though I have every right to slam the gameplay here, all I can think of is the fun that I had playing it. So in the end, I can't necessarily call the gameplay bad, but whether or not this is a challenge worthy of taking on, it's going to come down to you.
It will be a very long day for both sides. God have mercy on us all.
The last generation of consoles was a really weird time for graphics. It seemed to me like there has never been such a far divide between the best and worst looking games of the time, and Operation Darkness sort of teeter-totters on a tightrope between the two. The game's 3D graphics certainly aren't bad, but they aren't exactly great either. Character models look good enough from afar, but little details like hair and animations sort of fall flat. For example, it's not uncommon for an enemy to fall to the ground robotically several seconds after your attack hits. On the plus side, I absolutely love the game's 2D assets. Menu designs are sharp and eye-catching, and character art is flat out beautiful. I'm not sure why, but everything from the overall design of the character art to their emotive expressions made a real connection with me, which made it all the more difficult to come to grips with the fact that I had permanently lost a couple of party members later on in the game. One thing that did strike me as odd was this pretty noticeable slowdown during scenes with a lot on screen. I mean, I've played much better looking games on the 360 that never deviated from 60 frames per second. Once things start to slow down, it also becomes a little easier to notice a small amount of screen tearing and smoke and dust effects. In the end, this definitely won't be the game to convince you of Microsoft's dominance of the last gaming generation, but more important elements like great character art, smart menu designs, and an overall interesting look are sure to win you over. Alright guys, so it seems we have a little bit of a toss-up here. On one hand, we have a nice little strategy RPG. On the other, we have a mountain of flaws that would suggest otherwise. It's pretty obvious what side I'm on here, but the real question is whether or not this is a piece of gaming history worthy of digging up and reviving. Well, let's break down the pros and cons to find out. This game sits pretty comfortably in the confines of your typical SRPG, but it's definitely not afraid of venturing outside of those constraints with things like its adherence to projectile-based combat and its overall interesting premise. This is one of the most unique RPG worlds I've ever come across. The use of actual World War II history helps lend some realism to the fact that I'm shooting at zombies to aid in the Normandy beach invasion. The 2D art in this game is just amazing. Character art is both realistic and stylized, and menus are colorful enough to stand out against the muted color palette of the 3D graphics. Those of you looking to jump in for the long haul won't be disappointed, as this game has a really long runtime. Using this game's camera to position your troops is an agonizing chore. It's too sensitive and refuses to stay anywhere that you put it. I'm all for a difficult RPG, but at the very least, tell me that dead characters can't be resurrected before I lose any. The main character of this story is pretty bland and boring, but luckily his teammates are willing to pull their weight and spice things up a bit. Fights in this game can take a long time to complete, and with a roster of up to 11 or so characters, even the shortest encounters will eat up a good amount of your free time. Well guys, in the end, I had a really good time with this one, but at the same time, I can admit that there are a lot of problems baked into this little gem. On the plus side, there's this really interesting alternate take on World War II that keeps me sucked into the plot, but the game's difficulty and lack of balance comes real close to pulling me back out. As for whether or not you should take the plunge, well, that's a tough one to answer. I mean, I enjoyed the game, but now that I'm trying to quantify why, I have a hard time. I'd say at the very least, this will be one of the more interesting stories you're likely to come across. Plus the art and interesting take on SRPG combat may just pique your interest. At its current price online, you won't have to worry about spending more than $20, so thrifty collectors may want to keep an eye out. In the end, I'm glad I took a chance on this one. It's not one of those games that I'm interested in revisiting, but I'm glad that I was able to experience it. As for you tactical RPG fans, I would say snatch it up if you can find a good deal. But for those of you looking for a fun entry point to the genre, well, maybe keep on looking. Well, that's about it for me, guys, but I will be back soon, so as usual, I'm Jared.
I meant no disrespect. Just worried about joining a unit that has a woman in it.
And this has been Avalanche Reviews. What's up guys, thanks for checking out another episode of Avalanche Reviews. If World War era alternate history strategy RPGs are your bag, wow, that's a mouthful. I have a Ring of Red video right here for you, and if getting more game reviews pushed straight into your brain interests you, I'll try clicking that subscribe button to get the lowdown on all the weirdest games in my collection.